You know, a lot of legacy sequels don't really match up to their predecessor too much, but this one actually gets pretty close. Hey guys, so since I'm not doing streaming tonight, I had some time to kill, so I figured I'd get a couple reviews out of the way that I've been wanting to do for a while. At least about the two most recent movies I saw in theaters last week and this week. Just to keep things flowing as much as I can. I know I got a massive backlog I still need to sit down and record and catch up with, but for now time, let's talk about Gladiator 2. Gladiator 2 is obviously the legacy sequel to the original Ridley Scott Gladiator movie, which he came back to direct. There are some returning characters, and it is definitely a case of trying to find a sequel, 20 years after the original, or however long it was, 16 years, however long it was. And some context before we get into the actual sequel, and kind of my opinions on the first one, is I loved the first one when I was younger. It was kind of my first exposure to Ridley Scott as a kid. And I really, really fell in love with it. It was into the whole, the macho, gladiator fights, bam, 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 all that kind of shit. And it still stands as one of Ridley Scott's best, in my opinion. Russell Crowe had a lot of screen presence then. Joaquin Phoenix was mugging it for the camera, and I loved it. The actions were good, the drama was good. The first Gladiator still stands today as a very good movie. This one, I will say, it's not as good, and I don't think it was ever going to be. But it is better than I expected, largely because of one important element that I will get into later. But I guess just a general overview of the plot for those who don't know. Gladiator 2 takes place 16 years after the original, at which point it stars a new character, which I think is kind of given away in the trailer, is Russell Crowe's son from the first movie, who has been exiled from Rome and lived in a far-off country until Romans came and captured the city and moved him back into Rome to serve as a gladiator. So far, so basic. He also has a dead wife that happens, again, kind of following the beats of the first ones, that we also barely know before she dies. So again, it's a gladiator movie. And while he's there, he gets the attention of, he starts fighting off monkeys and stuff, and he gets the attention of Denzel Washington, who plays the character called... Why does it take so long for Denzel Washington to show up in the actual cast list on IMDb? That just seems kind of wrong to me. Then again, I know this kind of does an off appearance. Denzel Washington! Gets an end of Denzel Washington, who decides to recruit him to the actual Coliseum in Rome, and in return, for Lucius, that's the king character's name, for Lucius fighting the gladiatorial rings, he will give him Pedro Pascal, who is the general who took his home and killed his wife. So that's the basic plot there, but there's also little other machinations, like Pedro Pascal's character, General Cassius, is also kind of looking to overthrow the emperors in Rome, because they're twin men, and they're kind of idiots, and obviously very corrupt. I honestly kind of found them kind of grating, but they commit to the bit, and I respect that about them. So there's a whole kind of a coup situation going on. Lucilla from the first movie is back in this movie. And the whole thing kind of follows the political machinations of the Roman Empire and who kind of wants to do what and when, and that's kind of where the rest of the plot goes. Now, some highlights before I get into stuff I didn't really care for. The action scenes are still very good. I have not been a crazy fan of Ridley Scott's more recent work in the last few years, but this one kind of feels like return to form in a lot of ways. He still managed to capture that grittiness. He still managed to capture that what made the first one very exciting, and I found the action sequence very entertaining in a lot of ways, especially they only really use CGI when it was necessary, largely on the animals, and for good reason, because they should not use actual animals for this stuff. And even including the water fight scene, which for some reason people got kind of irked about. And I don't like Ridley Scott's a lot of his recent movies, but I do respect this decorum in the last few years, and people try to quiz him on historical accuracy and shit like that, of well, that doesn't make sense, and his response has largely been who fucking cares? And I actually have a lot of respect for that. I think too much credence is given to movies nowadays of, they wouldn't have known about sharks during this era. It's I think Ridley Scott's reaction was well, they had fucking boats, didn't they? They probably saw a shark. So I kind of appreciate that carte blanche, kind of just nonchalant caring about all this. Carte blanche. I'm hoping I'm using that phrase correctly. But anyway, so yeah, the action scenes are very good. The highlight of the movie really is Denzel Washington's character. What's the character's name? Why is Denzel Washington so low on the cast list? Or did I just scroll past him? No, I didn't. I lied. He's the number 2 slot. Macrinus, I think his name is. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but he is absolutely phenomenal. And I don't even think this movie's honestly worth watching for Denzel Washington alone. If everyone else is playing a role in Gladiator 2, Denzel Washington is like a villain in a Shakespeare play. Everything he does and the way Denzel plays him and the way he manipulates and moves everyone around, easily one of the best characters of the year. Denzel Washington makes it look so flawless, makes this look so easy, and plays this part to perfection. That it makes me so sad that Denzel is going to retire soon, because he is still at the top of his fucking game. That man has never lost a step, no matter what he does. Even when it's like lesser films, Denzel Washington is still one of the best actors currently working, and it really shines here. And even there's some scenes I want to talk about. It kind of goes into spoilers, but you can just feel his commanding presence in the room. You can feel his influence. You can feel how his schemes and his plotting and all that stuff comes into fruition, and it's so satisfying to watch. And I don't want to give too much away, at least not yet, but there's one scene in particular where I was kind of just in awe of how much screen presence Denzel Washington actually has in this movie. It's just those kind of aspects alone kind of made the movie for me. That made it okay, I can get past some of the weaker elements. And as far as weaker elements go, I do have to talk about Paul Mescal, who plays the main character, Lucius. To be fair, I don't think the kid is bad. I really don't. I think it's an admirable effort. He does the best he can with what he has. He is doing his best to kind of live up to an impossible legacy, but he just doesn't quite have the same screen presence as Russell Crowe did in the original. And he's doing his best. He's doing a solid job. It is going up against one of Russell Crowe's best roles of his career. So that was already going to be a huge thing to match, and he doesn't quite get there. It's still a very admirable effort, and I think he does a pretty decent job with what he has, and he is good in the action sequences. But yeah, it's not as strong as it could be. I do think it is a little too long. I don't think it's needed to be 2.5 hours. I think he probably could have a lot of stuff out. But it really does come all together pretty well in the finale and provides a relatively satisfying conclusion. For enough for me to say this is a solid 8 out of 10 for me. It's not oh my god, this is the most amazing film ever, but for a legacy sequel that probably should not have been as good as it is, an 8 is still very impressive. I'm trying to think if I had other major nitpicks or anything about the movie, and that's honestly not really. I had a pretty good time watching this. I think the main issue I had was that it does kind of follow the least interesting character in the cast, but at the same time, it's still entertaining. Even though it's not the most interesting character in the film, he's still the scenes where he's in and the scenes he conducts are still fun, are still action packed, and still kind of what you'd expect from a Gladiator movie. And I enjoyed that. There was a lot of it's a fun movie. I enjoyed it for what it is, and I never really expected this to be better than the first one, so I think having some fair expectations there is granted. I thought the soundtrack was good, although not as memorable as the original. And it does have a weird ending where it just kind of stops. Okay, everything has there's kind of an epilogue sequence after the climax, and everyone's kind of doing their thing, and then ends on a callback to Russell Crowe's character where it implies oh, maybe there'll be a cameo, and then it just cuts to black. And so I was oh, okay, I guess that's the ending. But that's really all I really have to say that negatively about this, other than to say it's a perfectly serviceable film. I think it's worth checking out in theaters if you haven't already. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. So that's my thoughts on Gladiator 2. I am going to talk about Wicked next, because that was the other big one that I did see over Thanksgiving weekend, and I do want to talk about it. So I'm going to get to that one in a bit. See you all then. Bye-bye.